Well, howdy, everyone. Really excited to have you join us for this second event that we're calling Coffee Table Conversations. So this is our opportunity to talk about a bunch of stuff that's been happening, in this case, related to the pandemic. We had another event a month or so ago about teacher preparation in a COVID world. But we know there's so many questions about health and wellness, mental and physical, inside this COVID pandemic. And we thought, we've got some people here who know a lot about this stuff. So we thought it would be really great to just share those kinds of things. So next slide, Del, if you don't mind. So I just want to give you a few reminders before we get started. One, we are going to be recording this presentation, and that way you can look at it later. We're going to upload it to YouTube. If you are uncomfortable being recorded, feel free to turn your camera off. And if you're having any kind of connection issues, it sometimes helps to turn your camera off and leave just the audio going. Do try to keep your microphone muted just so that we can all concentrate on what the individual speaker is saying. And if you know how to open the chat, which is at the bottom of the screen most of the time, it says chat with a little bubble. You can open that up and you can type questions to either Jody Ford or to everyone. And the idea is that Jody will be collecting those questions and then we'll offer them to the speakers afterwards. And if we don't get all the questions answered during today's time, we will collect them and we'll get the answers to you as soon as we can. So that's the idea. We're going to make sure that we answer all the questions that you have. What we'll do tonight is I'll introduce tonight's speakers. We'll do the presentations. Each of them has been given 7 minutes. So we're going to try really hard to stay on track of this. This is going to be tough for our faculty, but I know we can do it. Then we'll have some time for questions and answers and conclude with any additional things you guys want to talk about. Really looking forward to sharing the kinds of things that have been going on in the college and what it means for people like you and me trying to, work through our lives during this pandemic. All right, next slide, please, Del. So I want to say thanks. In the background here is Del Billings. He's been coordinating this work, and I just want to say thank you, Del, publicly. You've been great. The speakers for tonight, we'll get to see 7 experts in the various fields related to the pandemic issues we're talking about tonight. The first is Mick. He's going to talk about how to recover from an illness as an older adult with a chronic disease. And we know that some older adults are putting off going to the hospital. Got to make sure you don't do that. And then he's going to make sure you get well in a reasonable period of time. Then Meg Patterson is going to talk to us about managing stress. I think we all know what that looks like this time of year. Melinda Cohen-Gomez is going to talk about exercise modifications that we can do and sort of making sure we stay fit and healthy during the pandemic. Rob Carpenter is going to talk to us about the importance of weight control and sort of combating obesity during the pandemic. Carley Mcchord is going to take us to the mental health side, and she's going to make sure that we are being socially but not emotionally distant, or as some of my folks like to say, physically distant but not socially distant. So I'm sure she's going to walk us through those. Dr. Lori Greenwood is going to talk about how our athletic training students are caring for athletes during the COVID pandemic, and we still need them healthy. And so she'll share some of the stuff that's been going on. And finally, Adam Barry is going to explore a little bit of our darker side and our society's relationship with alcohol and help you think through how you're using alcohol during the pandemic. All right, next slide. All right, what I want to do first is introduce Melinda Sheffield Moore. She's the department head for health and kinesiology, and she'll be our MC for this evening.
Howdy, everyone from Health and Kinesiology. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Jody, and all of our visitors today. We have a fantastic lineup, as the Dean has shared, and it's my job and, of course, Jody's job to keep us on track. And since we have some really, I think, highly relevant topics tonight related to this pandemic that we are all experiencing, let's jump right in and hear from Dr. Mick Deutsch, the director of the Center for Translational Research in Aging and Longevity, and he's going to speak on how to recover from illness as an older adult with the chronic disease. Take it away, Dr. Deutsch.
Thank you, Melinda, and good evening, everybody. So I will be the first to tell you something about COVID, and now we are really discussing COVID now for 9 months, and we are really very much have changed our lives. But I try to give some brightness here, at least on how we can cope, because we need to understand that COVID is really dangerous. It's way more dangerous than many other diseases. It's now already the 3rd cause of dying in the US, so it means it's really dangerous. It is dangerous particularly for people that have pre-existing conditions like cancer, like overweight, like being older. All those situations causes that you have a higher risk of dying from COVID or being very sick. Now, one other factor that is really underestimated, but is now from recent research very clear, that if you are malnourished, that you're also at a higher risk to die from COVID. And why is malnutrition so important? Because on the left upper, you see right as survival. We did some studies, and here, for instance, in COPD patients, if they were malnourished in the hospital and they did not were provided enough nutrition, they had a 4 times higher chance of dying in the hospital or at home. So indicating how important malnutrition is. That is the topic of the research that we are doing and love. So on the table below that, I want to show some very recent new research that we have gotten that really gives us more insight. When you look at protein metabolism in the body, when you eat, it will go up. And when you are fasted, it will go down. So early in the morning, you have more protein breakdown. We have now found that in ICU patients, but also COPD patients or in older individuals, in the morning, these people lose less protein, which is absolutely contrary to what you would think, but it means that older people with ICU, very sick, cycle less much. And so how can you improve that? Because that is our aim. So we have done a lot of other research and found that if you take more protein in the diet, actually you can increase this protein breakdown in the morning. You become more healthy. Also, exercise is doing this, but also nutritional components like HMB and fish oil, they all have the same effect. So that is a very new hypothesis that we are dealing with, and very interesting. If people have an improvement of this protein breakdown in the morning, they are also more anabolic when you feed them. So left lower, there's a very good relation between lower protein breakdown in the morning and a lower net anabolism. So that really makes the point that nutritional components can help to improve your metabolism. And because we know malnutrition is very severe risk factor for COVID, everything we can do to improve your metabolism, we should do. So if you think about right upper, it is actually, we have to think about when you were sick of COVID and you're going home, what do you want to do in the rehabilitation? And our view now is, and upcoming research will try to understand that, is indeed giving those subjects innovative nutritional supplements like the ones that we discussed, those components, and also give them exercise. Now, exercise is complicated because we cannot have them in our institution. So we are now focusing on home-based exercise using telehealth to get people more active. So in the right middle, you see muscle strength, important for survival, really can be improved by taking enough protein, being active at home already, and taking, for instance, supplement in capsules like the fish oil and the HMB. And our view here is that it will improve the outcome because there will be lower readmission rates, there will be faster recovery. So we have to view this positively. You can get an infection from COVID if you have a pre-existing condition, are older, or are malnourished. We just should really focus on those things that make things better. And I think later on in the evening, you will hear people talking about all these positive things. But the big thing is you can get COVID. If you survive COVID in the hospital or you can manage there, then for sure you need to work on that at home. You need to increase your rehabilitation and preferably also in the hospital already get enough nutrition. This is my point I want to make now, and I'm really open for any questions about this view.
Thank you, Mick. I think what that says to me is that it's great information, and I think it tells us that we need to be healthy before we ever get exposed to any diseases, right? And things that help keep us healthy would be exercise, eating healthy proteins. Can you give us some examples of healthy proteins, Dr. Deutsch?
Yeah, so healthy proteins in our research are mainly proteins that are coming from milk, dairy proteins, because they have such a good composition of essential amino acids. So that is what we usually advise. But the proteins are important, but maybe we should also add some additional components to make us a little bit better here.
Can you also tell us, Dr. Deutsch, why it's important and how, again, those proteins affect our muscles, and why do we care if our muscles are strong with a disease like this?
Now, first of all, large research has shown that if you are stronger, you actually are in a better condition. And if you are in a better condition, you are more healthy. If you get sick, you very quickly will lose your muscle strength. So those two things come together. So it means that if people are becoming weaker, they usually are more sicker. So that's why a lot of focus is on increasing muscle health. Of course, the logic behind it is also that if you are stronger, you can breathe better, you will be more active, your body will be used, there will be maybe processes in muscle or in metabolism that are positively helping your immune system. There are maybe components excreted by muscle tissue that will help your immune system. So that at the end, we think that the muscle, good muscle strength and mass is really very important to stay healthy. That's why we always advise older people to stay active and eat enough protein and other components.
Thank you, Dr. Deutsch. Do we have any other questions from any of our individuals that you want to submit via chat or directly? We just hit 7 minutes.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. This is Steve Phillips. I'm 73 years old. I'm in the gym 4 times a week. I eat fresh vegetables and fruits every day, a lot of steak, a lot of shrimp, and in very good health right now. But I have aspergillus and chronic sinusitis. This aspergillus, this lung function, pulmonary issue, how dangerous would it be for me if I got this, regardless or irrespective of what I eat, of my awesome diet? I don't drink. So
yeah, so there are 2 things here. First of all, if you are really healthy, that doesn't protect you, of course. It just helps you to manage the infection better.
right.
It's a misunderstanding. People say, oh, I'm healthy, I can't get infected and nothing will happen. That's absolutely not true. It is really about how your body can cope with it. So any condition that above the normal situation, in your case, this chronic lung infection, indeed increases your risk to not be able to withstand the infection as you should. But on the other hand, by increasing your health and be active and also take sufficient and good nutrition, on the other hand, will help again. So it's a balanced situation. But I still advise everybody to wear a face mask, be careful. You know, that is really important. It is so important. If suddenly you are infected and you cannot do anything about it, there is no therapeutic that can help you at the moment in such a way that it will stop you from having all the symptoms. There's no therapeutic, and a vaccine will not help you either when you already have it. That's also a mistake. a vaccine is not a therapeutic, it's preventive.
All right. I
Thank you.
don't see any other questions for Dr. Deutsch. Thank you, sir. Wonderful talk. Let's move on to Dr. Meg Patterson. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Health and Kinesiology and Health Education. She's talking today about managing stress during COVID-19. Take it away, Meg.
All right. Thanks so much for having me tonight. And I'm excited to talk to you all about managing stress during COVID-19. I'm going to cut to the chase. We're all pretty stressed out right now. I will say that you're not alone. People across the globe are experiencing heightened levels of stress compared to what we've seen recently. And it makes sense, right? We're living through a global pandemic that has impacted every corner of our life, has brought on a lot of uncertainty, and has essentially threatened our physical, emotional, and economic security. So it makes sense that we're stressed. But I don't mean to just be a downer, and I don't want to bum you out. I do want to talk about, however, what to do about it and how to survive this pandemic in more ways than one. So tonight, I'm going to talk about what stress is and what happens to your body when you experience stress, how COVID-19 has changed stress a little bit and how it's unique during this time, and then a couple of strategies as far as what we can do about it. So first of all, stress is a physiological response to a real or imagined threat. Essentially what happens is if you feel threatened, your body will engage in a fight or flight response so that you can survive that threat. Now, a long time ago, we human beings used to have to survive pretty intense physical threats, like think bear attacks type of threats. Fortunately, we don't have to do that so much anymore, but it's a similar response as to being attacked by a bear. Your body is trying to survive this threat. Now, I don't mean to put any more stress on you, but for the purposes of education, I want you to imagine yourself outrunning a bear, okay? And mind you, fun fact, bears can run up to 30 miles per hour. So we are really having to haul it to outrun this bear. And so to do that, our body will engage in a stress response, which means two things are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is your body is going to go through an adrenaline rush. I'm sure you've experienced an adrenaline rush before. And what happens when you have an adrenaline rush is that your body is creating an opportunity to have readily available energy, also called glucose, which is the simplest form of sugar. And it's kind of like you were to flood your veins with an energy drink, for example. And that's what makes you have that superhuman speed and that superhuman strength when you have an adrenaline rush, because you have all this energy and you can go, go, go. The second thing that happens when you experience a stress response is your body is flooded with what's called cortisol. Now, cortisol is responsible for prioritizing where that energy is used in your body. So again, going back to our bear scenario, if we're trying to outrun a bear, what's going to happen is that our heart rates are going to go up, our blood pressure is going to go up, our pupils are going to dilate, blood is going to go straight to our lungs, our heart, and our muscles so that we can indeed outrun the bear, right? And in that process, what's also going to happen is that other aspects of our body that would normally require energy are going to be muted. So things like the critical thinking areas of your brain, you don't need to solve the world's problems while you're outrunning a bear, right? Or your digestive system. It would be really, really unideal if you have to take a pit stop while you're trying to outrun the bear. And importantly for us now, what also happens is that our immune systems are muted when we have stress responses. So whenever you have an immune response and your body is fighting off pathogens like bacteria or viruses, it requires a lot of energy out of your body. And in the moment where you're trying to survive a threat like outrunning a bear, your body decides, you know what, the virus can wait. We're going to outrun this bear first, right? Now you can probably see where I'm going. There's a little bit of a difference between outrunning a bear and surviving a global pandemic. One of the biggest differences is that, let's say we were victorious and we outran this bear. Our stress response is intense. It's really, really physical, but then it's over and our body can signal ourselves to recover. However, the COVID-19 pandemic is chronic and consistent, and it never signals our bodies to recover. And meanwhile, we're sheltering in place, we're socially distancing, we're working from home, it's not the best case scenario for our critical thinking skills to be muted or our immune systems to be muted. And while, yes, it makes sense when you're outrunning a bear, the same response is happening because our body is experiencing threat from this pandemic. So I do have good news. There are some things that you can do about this. I'm going to give you two strategies, one of which is more of a response and a reaction to a stress, and the other is more of a proactive approach. So the first one is, and this makes so much sense, it's backed by research and it's also backed just by common sense, is address stress and handle it the way that your body expects you to, which is physically. Fighting or flighting is a really physical experience. So when you experience stress and your body is priming you to fight or flight, it's expecting you to be active. Now, I know that right now is a weird time to be active. Maybe you were a member at a gym that you're no longer a member of, maybe you were on a team, or maybe your worlds just look different, but I can't stress enough, pun intended, to make sure you get active and work that out, even in small bits, because that is what's going to prompt your body into recovery and will allow you to relax and allow your immune systems to turn back on, which we all want when surviving a pandemic, right? And my second strategy, one that is very near and dear to my heart. So most of my research involves what's called social network analysis. And that's essentially the investigation of how human connection is really imperative to our health. And what I would say is, in order to mitigate our stress responses, you need to lean on your social networks. Now, activity is a great way to respond to stress. We all know we're stressed out. We all know that those processes are happening in our bodies. So being active is great, but it's also helpful to reduce the intensity of stress responses that come. And one thing your social network can do for you is it provides you support and security so you don't feel as threatened and you're less likely to have as intense of a stress response. Now, again, I can't stress enough that this is a weird time for social relationships. And I want to praise being COVID cautious during this time. But I actually just published a paper, it's really exciting, that the support you can gain online digitally is really, really similar and yields the same health benefits as some of your in-person connections. And while it may not be our ideal and it may not be the best case scenario long-term, you can get so much from your favorite people. So find your favorite people, connect with them on a daily basis, and try and be proactive and keep those stress responses from being as intense as they might otherwise be. So that's all I have for you. Thank you guys for your attention, and I wish you well as we outrun this COVID-19 bear.
Thank you, Dr. Patterson. I just received a stressful text from the dean where she threatened me and said, please do not, we're waiting for questions at the end. So Steve, you're the only one that gets a question in the midst of the presentation. So the rest of us have to wait. So sorry, Dean, I couldn't resist. It was a perfect setup. Thank you, Dr. Patterson. So let's move on now to someone that can talk to us about how we reduce our stress through exercise. Lorinda Cohen-Gomez is an instructional professor and the Associate Chair for the Physical Education Activity Program. And she's going to talk to us today about exercise during COVID-19. Take it away, Lorinda.
Howdy, everyone. Thank you for inviting me tonight to have a chance to talk about a passion that I personally have, as well as our entire physical education activity program. And this really works well going off of what Dr. Patterson talked about with how to manage stress. Now, I would like to provide you with information that you can use when it comes to implementing exercise and incorporating that routine into your lifestyle. All this information is stuff that we do teach in the physical education activity program, because right now we're also trying to help our students get through this pandemic as well, because we're all going through changes, they're going through changes, and we really need to work together with this information. So the first way that you can incorporate exercise into your lifestyle is enjoy nature. What does that mean? Go for a walk, a run, a bike ride, a hike, anything that's going to get you outdoors and moving. Not only will you benefit directly from the activity itself, but you're going to also benefit from being out in those natural elements and being in nature. Do things around your house. Think about all the stuff you do around your house just to maintain it. you vacuum, you do laundry, you mow your yard. All of those chores require you to actually get up and move. And you can also even get creative when you're doing your chores. Maybe every time you get your laundry out of the dryer, do squats. Maybe when you're waiting for your food to finish cooking, do some jumping jacks. Once again, different ways that you can incorporate more exercise into your schedule. There's also a lot of online virtual classes and videos now. Many of our fitness organizations and professionals, including even PF, because we're having to do this with our students, are now targeting this platform to help people maintain their fitness routine while they're in the comfort of their own home. These professionals are also teaching people how to use their body weight as a fitness tool. And this is something that we tell our students, no matter where you go, whether you have to travel for your job, or even now during the pandemic, you always have your body with you. And then we're also having professionals, as well as our educators, teach students how you can use everyday household items as exercise equipment. Get a jug of milk out of the refrigerator for resistance, right? You can even use cans or something along those lines to help as well. Bring playtime back. When you think of playtime, you probably think of things that you enjoy or have fun with. Just watch kids on a playground, right? They're running around, they enjoy it. And this could also include you getting a chance to spend time with your family and close friends, the people that you are around on a regular basis. Go out in your yard and play a game of kickball. Dance around the living room. Make an activity as you watch your favorite TV show, right? Maybe there's a character in that TV show, they have a common line. Every time they say it, maybe you have to do some push-ups. Something that's going to bring that fun and enjoyment back into your schedule and incorporating more activity. And this also gives you a chance, once again, to spend that quality time with your family and friends, making it fun. You can also now have active Zoom meetings. Zoom has become a staple in many of our lives right now because that's how we're connecting with a lot of people we work with, as well as our social circle. So instead of us just sitting at the computer and having our meeting and talking, maybe we schedule a time where you go for a walk during the Zoom meeting. Not only are you still accomplishing and talking about what you need to, but you're actually getting up and moving during that time. Now, if you are okay with going to public places, or if you are still at a gym, and make sure there's some guidelines that you do want to follow for your safety. You do want to practice the physical distancing of 6 feet, and you always want to wear your mask. If you're not used to wearing a mask when you engage in activity, start out slow to gradually build yourself up to it. You may have to schedule frequent breaks, but allow your body to acclimate to it. And these are the two main reasons of how we've actually been able to have our activity classes this semester, because we're maintaining that social distancing and we're having the students wear their masks. Also, bring your own water bottle so that way you can stay hydrated as you engage in activity. And then also bring hand sanitizer with you. So that way, if you do touch a public surface, you can sanitize your hands afterwards. Now, depending on where you go, for example, if you're in the gym, make sure you use their disinfectant to wipe down the surfaces before and after use. If you want to go to a place like a park, it might not be a bad idea to bring your own travel pack of wipes with you so you can clean the surfaces. Now, we all know exercise is good for us. Dr. Deutsch, Dr. Patterson, they both covered this in their presentation. But some of those direct benefits that could help you with the pandemic, it is going to reduce the risk of certain health conditions such as hypertension, obesity, diabetes, which are all classified as higher risk factors for the severity of COVID. Another benefit, it's going to help with your immune system. Doing moderate activity has an immune boosting effect on the body that will help you fight off infection. And we're not talking about having to go run a marathon. Just doing everyday lifestyle activity, avoiding that sedentary of constantly sitting, that's all going to have an effect to help improve that immune system. It's also going to help with your mental health. Many times when people think about exercise, they directly go to the physical benefits, but there's a lot of benefits to help us with our mental health. It's going to reduce the stress, it's going to reduce our anxiety, and then it also helps reduce something more severe such as depression. And a lot of this has to do with how exercise affects our hormone level, as well as our neurotransmitter function within the brain. So overall, the main takeaway with this information is to try to find ways to incorporate more activity into your lifestyle. Do things that you enjoy because you're more likely going to stick with it and want to keep going back for more. Also, get your family and close friends involved. Once again, the people you are around on a regular basis. Because one, it will help hold you accountable. When somebody else is involved, that's going to push you to actually want to go and do the activity. It's also going to help improve the quality of your lives together. And then most importantly, it's going to improve your relationship with each other just because of that quality time you get to spend with one another. And this is exactly what we try to teach our students in the physical education activity program. Currently, we have over 6,000 students enrolled in a variety of our health and physical activity classes. We have created a safe environment for them to be able to come to class, and we have also done things to accommodate those who had to go remote. We not only teach our students information that they can use during the semester, but we try to provide them with tools that they're going to apply for the rest of their life. Ultimately, we want our students to be successful, and through the use of physical activity, we feel that health and wellness is that foundational component to making that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorinda. Excellent information about exercise. It struck me that one of the other key things and reasons to be exercising outdoors, aside from airflow, the benefits of the airflow is that if we're all inside all day long, we're not getting any sunlight, and we're not getting any vitamin D, which are important. So keep that in mind, and another good reason to get out and exercise. So next up is Dr. Robert Carpenter. He is from the College of Medicine, and he's talking today about the importance of weight control and treating obesity and combating the COVID-19 pandemic. Take it away, Rob.
Howdy, everyone. I'm Rob Carpenter, as Dr. Sheffield said, and I am a general and bariatric surgeon. Is there any chance we could advance to the next slide? And one more, please. So I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share time with you today. As a general and bariatric surgeon, one of the great loves of my life is sharing the opportunity to improve your overall health through controlling your weight in a healthy manner. And I think it's great information that you've already received today about the opportunity to reduce stress, the opportunity to increase your level of activity, and additionally, the importance of maintaining a healthy approach to your life initially before you're ever even challenged by disease, which Dr. Deutsch talked about. What we need to realize is that obesity has not gone away. Obesity, in fact, continues to be an increasingly significant problem in the United States and the world. Unfortunately, it's one of the many things that Americans have exported out into other nations, in fact, leading up into this pandemic. And we know that obesity itself and overweight have a significant reduction in the length of individuals' lives. It decreases their quality of life, and it also increases the overall expense that we experience here in the United States. The comorbidities or diseases that are related to obesity are really what have that dramatic impact, especially on the reduction in lifespan. Diabetes, heart disease, infertility in both men and women, obstructive sleep apnea, and eventually organ failure, as well as other problems like arthritis, can not only impact the way that we experience the world and our ability to go out and work and do the things that we need to enjoy life, but also can dramatically reduce our capacity to have a lengthy life. We know that obesity at baseline disproportionately impacts women, populations of colors, and especially families at greatest socioeconomic risk. So we're talking about some of the populations in the United States who are not only at most risk for obesity, but also at the greatest degree of risk for being encountering COVID-19 or the virus that causes it, because they all too often are not able to stay at home and have the benefits that many of us do with regards to the ability to work remotely. Well, we also know that individuals suffering from obesity are more susceptible to contracting COVID-19. What's more, individuals that have a body mass index greater than 30, thereby being defined as suffering from obesity, can be 3 times more likely to actually suffer a severe enough course of the disease that they wind up needing to be hospitalized. This was one of the real sources of early death in the first few months of the pandemic, because these individuals wound up requiring intubation as a result of their chronic respiratory problems and restrictive lung disease. And that ended up causing such significant secondary complications that it did result in what we know to be an increased risk of dying from COVID-19 complications. One of the things, especially with regards to the fact that there are so many educators on the call, is that obesity is not just a problem that's faced by adults. Unfortunately, because of things like food insecurity and the socioeconomic impact that we have from COVID-19, the quality of food that children are being presented is actually declining. Dr. Liu shared some very important information about stress from the College of Education and their research with regards to the impact that that can have on children's perception of self, as well as their likelihood of actually going on to eat excessively, resulting in severe health problems early in life. In fact, many of you have seen the relatively small number, but very tragic number of children who at age 10 or 12 have died from the complications of COVID-19. If you track their health history, they oftentimes have early onset of comorbidities from their childhood or adolescent overweight or obesity. So there is a significant increased risk with that. Well, why is this the case? We know from the work of great scientists like Dr. Deutsch and his team that obesity at baseline carries a significant hyperinflammatory state. That means that chronically across the entire panoply of their health systems and their organ systems, people who suffer from overweight and obesity are constantly stressed at a physiologic level, not just a psychological level. And that elevated degree of hyperinflammatory response is then augmented when they suffer from COVID-19. That's one of the reasons why we know that they go on to develop severe inflammatory response that can damage their organs to the point that they can't survive. What we do know is that through efforts, whether they are through psychological counseling, through exercise, or better yet, through multimodal therapy, including medications and in some instances, interventions like obesity surgery or bariatric surgery, we can reduce an individual's weight, decrease their body mass index, and dramatically reduce their risk overall. We've also shown that those individuals who do stabilize and then decrease their weight in a healthy manner while maintaining their body, decreasing their body fat, but maintaining or increasing their lean muscle mass, actually can not only improve their comorbidities, increase their longevity, but help reduce their risk should they contract COVID-19. We know that there's an important improvement in that risk to children and other people in a household when the primary caregiver and the individual who purchases and then prepares food actually increases their level of activity, improves their diet, and decreases their weight. We call that the halo effect that we've known about for a long time. It's through efforts of the organizations that you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, including the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery, for which I'm a national officer, and I'm in the immediate past president of the Texas Association for Bariatric Surgery, that we're working through groups and with groups like the College of Education and those of you that are out in the community to improve the knowledge that we have about the importance of weight loss and weight control. Happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you once again to the College of Education for the opportunity to share time with you today.
Thank you, Rob. Excellent talk. Lots of great information. Lots of themes that are threading through here in terms of exercise, staying fit, and not being obese, and reducing our inflammation and eating right. So that brings me next to the Dr. Carley Mcchord. I'm supposed to remind you, please put some questions in the chat. Our speakers are eager to answer some of those questions, and Jody is collecting them. So next up, let's talk a little bit about how we can help improve our health through socially but not emotionally distanced behaviors. It's Dr. Carley Mcchord, also from the College of Medicine. Thank you, Carley.
And I'm split. I'm also part of the College of Education, so shout out for joint appointments. Howdy, thanks everyone so much for the opportunity to talk about telehealth and staying connected during COVID-19. When I first teach my first lecture on Telehealth 101 every year, we talk about the history of telehealth and what it is kind of at its most basic definition of tele, from a distance and health. And the very first examples of health information at a distance was in the bubonic plague, when we lit bonfires to signal to other towns when an outbreak had occurred. And I'm super glad that we have evolved past the use of bonfires, or we'd all be in trouble. Civil War led to development of Morse code. Space race led to developments in remote monitoring of health data and healthcare via video. So these advancements in telehealth have sparked from public emergencies, crises, and war, and today is no different. COVID-19 has rapidly launched telehealth to the forefront of healthcare. Texas A&M's launch into telehealth was driven by the crisis of accessibility in rural areas. So over half of the counties in Texas have 0 psychologists, 0 psychiatrists. 90% of our counties are designated as mental health professional shortage areas, and we're 49th in mental health spending. So there's lots of opportunities for enhancing mental health in Texas. And 11 years ago, Dr. Timothy Elliott, another faculty member in the College of Education, and Dr. Jim Burdine from the School of Public Health partnered up to launch our very first telecounseling services. And that first grant provided me my first assistantship and gave me a fire for improving access to care via telehealth. And a little over 6 years ago, they handed it over to me. We've built out a network of 16 access points in our hub and spoke model in 10 counties. Those spoke sites are in primary care clinics, community-run resource centers, and most, as of late, in a jail in one of our communities. And we also have direct-to-person care available from any mobile device as our technology has improved, which has been great. Pre-COVID, we were probably 90% where people were going to those access points in their community so they could have the technology and the internet they needed. It had some security and just some additional benefits of going to a facility for care. And we did about 10% in-home. And COVID has totally flipped that on its head for us. Also, thanks to the Texas legislature, funds were approved to bring short-term 4 sessions or less bridge services to our schools. So during COVID, we've launched counseling and psychiatry teleservices to 21 districts, 108 schools, and we're covering 60,000 student lives. And I just got to give a shout out to Amy Hanant on this call, because without her help, there's no way we could have done so much in the last 6 months. So we've been super busy in COVID, but we're having a blast expanding access to care and training the next generation of psychologists. We've trained over 100 doctoral students to date too. So I want to talk to you a little bit about evidence of effectiveness. So here at the clinic, we use several measures to track symptoms and see if people are getting better. We use a depression measure, an anxiety measure, a health-related quality of life measure. I think it's noteworthy, and like thinking about the population that we serve, like 65% of them are uninsured, so they have major barriers in access to care. Over half have had past trauma experiences, and 42% present with suicidal ideation at intake. So there's a lot to work on, but even in that, through telehealth and 4 sessions, on average, clients experience clinically and statistically significant declines in those symptoms in just a matter of 4 sessions. We also evaluate client satisfaction. Over 90% of our clients feel like the care was just as good as in person, that it helped them deal more effectively with their problems. And maybe most importantly, over 90% in our rural communities say that they would have gone without services if not for these services. So, and there's strong evidence of effectiveness for telehealth just in general, sorry. Especially for video conference therapy and mental health services. The American Telemedicine Association said in their guidelines that, quote, to date, no studies have identified a patient subgroup that does not benefit from or is harmed by mental health care provided through remote video conferencing. Recent large randomized control trials demonstrate effectiveness, and many smaller trials also support this conclusion. So people, consumers, us, the patients are ready for telehealth and have been even pre-COVID. This survey was from American Hospital Association that 76% of patients prioritize access to care over the need for human interaction with their healthcare professional. The providers and the reimbursement policies were less so gung-ho about telehealth pre-COVID. There's research showing some underlying provider bias about effectiveness and kind of what providers are bringing to the table. There are regulations and reimbursement limitations that were really slowing growth for telehealth, but many of those changed overnight with COVID-19. So I'm really curious to see what policies are going to persist. So hopefully now I've convinced you of the promise of telehealth and its effectiveness. And I want to talk to you about a few ways to stay connected during COVID-19. I don't know if we have any students on the call, but TAMU Student Health Services has virtual visits. The Counseling and Psychological Services starts with a phone screening, and then all of their workshops, groups, individual sessions are all online, and they've been doing phone telehealth through Helpline for a very, very long time. They were way ahead of their times. Faculty and staff, we have an employee assistance program that has 4 free built-in counseling sessions, which can all be done virtually. So no worries about copay. And our EAP program has a really awesome website too, with a wealth of resources from like financial management to stress management. For primary care to specialty care, we have access to virtual visits through MD Live, second opinions through Second MD. We have some really great telehealth benefits. And even if you aren't affiliated with Texas A&M, there's a lot of options for telehealth. I would recommend, if you're insured, that starting with the number on the back of your card is really the best place to start. There's plenty of startups that are like focused on specific health concerns. If there's something in particular you're looking for, or trusted national companies, I just would encourage you to make sure you check your credentials and their ratings before you jump in. We know that telehealth is effective and safe. You still need to vet the quality of the provider on the other end. The telehealth is only as good as the provider on the other side. So another way to stay connected is through volunteering. I love harping on volunteering. Decreases the risk of depression, reduces stress, helps with feeling a sense of purpose, staying physically and mentally active. We talked about all of this. And you're probably wondering, okay, but how do I do that in the middle of a pandemic? But there are virtual resources for that. So volunteermatch.org has over 700,000 virtual volunteering opportunities. It's everything from like advocacy to animals, children to seniors, education. It should be right up some of our alleys. So there's a lot of research evidence about loneliness, that loneliness can be as damaging as to your health as 15 cigarettes a day. So I know that we're all craving in-person contact, and there are some ways to do that safely. You've heard some of those already today on the call. But my hope for you guys is that we'll all use the technology tools we've been given in the meantime to sustain our relationships and even build new ones, and continue to access care when you need it, and don't postpone seeing a doctor when you need it. There's definitely ways to say socially or physically distant, but not emotionally distant. I hope you all will persist in using those even when it's hard. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. McCord. It's good to hear about things that we can do to help improve our mental health, and that we don't have to go sit in a room with our mask on to talk to somebody to help in that regard. So I thought it would be great then for us to move on to somebody who is on the front lines caring for our kids that are our athletes that are in our schools. And so please welcome me in joining Dr. Lori Greenwood, who's a clinical professor and director of the Masters of Science in Athletic Training program in Health and Kinesiology. And she's talking today about how our MSAT students are caring for high school athletes during COVID. Thank you, Dr. Greenwood.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about athletic training services that are being provided by our graduate athletic training students in the time of COVID. So first, let me just start by saying that athletics is continuing. which means the services that athletic trainers provide is also continuing. We're just approaching it in a little bit of a different way. So we have a Master of Science in Athletic Training program, and athletic trainers provide services, as you can see on this list here, from prevention to emergency management, to assessment of injuries, to treatment and rehabilitation of those injuries, in some cases, post-surgical rehabilitation, and then hopefully eventually return to participation at the level they were at before. Even though athletic trainers, as the title would tell you, is that yes, we provide services to athletes, but you can find athletic trainers working in a variety of different active patient populations. We also care for firefighters and police officers. We care for astronauts. We work in hospitals. We work in clinics. You can find us anywhere from NASA to NASCAR. We work with the Corps of Cadets here. Our students provide services to them. We work with the dance science program. Our students provide services to them. So all of this is still going on during COVID. So how are we doing that as safely as possible and still supporting our student athletes in this case? Well, it all started in March where things had to be shut down. And so our students did learn a lot about telerehabilitation. And so we still had students that were having to go through rehabilitation. And during the end of the spring semester and early summer semesters, they were still having to provide care, but they're having to do so kind of in a more of a lockdown situation. So that's where telerehab came in. And then in August, once all of our infection control plans are in place and our students as well as the staff and the student athletes have been educated in terms of protocols, then we were able to start back again. So to give you just a little bit of an insight what a day in the protocol looks like, it really starts with a first thing, wake up in the morning and fill out a daily symptom survey checklist. And depending upon the results of the survey, you may or may not leave your house. And then you're going to have your temperature checked before you enter any athletic facility, whether that is at the secondary school systems or whether that is at Texas A&M Athletics. And very often it'll be one of our graduate students that is standing there taking the temperatures and filling out the forms and reminding everybody to wear their masks, not as a chin strap, but over their nose and over their mouth, and to direct them to, washing their hands and using the sanitizer and, not reusing towels, not putting their mouth on the water spigots. So part of our job is obviously general oversight for infection control, but then we're providing all the same services that we provided before. Our athletes, we still need to try to prevent their injuries as much as we can. We are still evaluating them. We're still providing emergency management on the field. If you go to any Texas A&M athletic events or any of the events at our local high schools, you will see staff athletic trainers and you will see our graduate athletic training students out there as well with their masks on. Now, since we would like to be able to maintain that distance, how do you do that and still providing treatment to your patient population? Well, you may still need to have direct contact, but you try to limit the amount of direct contact time to those things that are evidence-based, best practices, and will give you the best patient outcomes. We also do a lot of home exercise program prescriptions, and we still do telehealth and telerehabilitation to follow up. We also have a new protocol. We have a post-COVID return protocol. Whenever athletes used to talk about, are you in the protocol, they generally meant the post-concussion protocol. Now they're talking about a post-COVID protocol, because obviously if a student athlete has had COVID, we do have a concern for cardiac and respiratory dysfunction. So then we have to take them through a gradated exercise prescription return to competition plan. And we have to monitor them along with our team physicians and their primary care physicians the entire step of the way. So even though things are different now, we are still providing the same level of care to the patient population. Now, with our graduate students that are what we call in the bubble with Texas A&M Athletics, they're being tested 3 times a week. So their noses get very sore. For those students that are doing their clinical assignments out at the secondary school, obviously they don't have the levels of testing, but they have to do a lot more student athlete education and reminders. And those also branch out into the public area and into working with their family units and working more with the community. Because it's not just what happens inside the athletics bubble, it's what the athletes are then going home to and bringing back into the athletics bubble. So we have to continually having that thread of education, and because things are ever changing and the science of COVID is ever changing. So we have to be reactive to that as well. And again, our student athletes are still becoming injured. They are still suffering concussions, although we do our best to prevent those. So we still have to take them through the same level of care we did before. We're just having to do that in the times of COVID. So one of the things I'd really just like to make sure to give a shout out to our graduate athletic training students. They are doing an amazing job, and they're having to deal with just, the academic rigors of our program, the research element of our program, and then providing high level of care to these various patient populations in our community. So thank you for your time tonight. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Dr. Greenwood, and thanks to your students for being on the front lines for all of our athletes in Bryan College Station and abroad. So we really appreciate all you're doing. Last but not least, we have tonight, please don't forget your chat questions. If I don't start seeing some more chat questions, I'm going to start asking you questions. So the dean wants to see questions and Jody wants some questions. So last but not least, many of us have been hanging out inside and probably drinking a little bit too much. And so I thought it would be appropriate to have Dr. Adam Berry, who's a professor in health and kinesiology and my associate department head. He's going to talk about maintaining a healthy relationship with alcohol. Thank you, Dr. Berry.
Howdy. Thanks for having me. Thanks for drinking in moderation so you're still awake and ready for this last speaker. So even prior to the pandemic, alcohol was a really big public health issue in America. In the United States, excessive alcohol use is associated with almost 100,000 deaths a year, 3 million years of potential life loss every year. And just in a single year, it costs the United States about almost 250 billion, like billion with a B. And I'm sure you're like, well, how did they get that number? Well, it's really loss of workplace productivity, healthcare expenses, and a combination of court cost and cost of motor vehicle and property damage. And Melinda alluded to this, but during the past several months, some of you might have seen some news reports that Americans have increased their drinking during the COVID pandemic. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or glass if that applies to you. But in general, the data says it's true. Now, we don't have really rich data on consumption because the pandemic is kind of new. But what we really do have is excellent sales data. So compared to May 2019, brick and mortar alcohol dollar sales in May 2020 were up 40%. And online sales of alcohol are up over 300%. In Texas, for April 2020, sales for spirits were up 13%. For wine, they were up 15%, and for beer, they're up 6%. And this is compared to like the previous 3 Aprils from 2017 to 2019. So essentially what this means is COVID has exacerbated our alcohol-related issues. And this is especially true in areas and countries that have gone into lockdowns. So lockdowns, although we haven't experienced this in Texas, they represent this really complex interplay of issues. You have heightened financial difficulties. You have people that are socially isolated, people that feel senses of uncertainty about their future, their work statuses. And then you have a disruption of clinical services. And I want to stop there and say this is why those telehealth services are incredibly important, right? Because when you can't go see your provider, that provides that connection that you can have. But that disruption of clinical services is really important for people with alcohol use disorders. So there was a UK study that looked at patients that were abstinent prior to lockdown, and they'd been abstinent for almost 2 years. About one in 5 of them relapsed during lockdown, and their average consumption during that relapse was about 48.8 units. And so to give you an American term, that equates to about 29 beers a week, roughly. But even in places that are not under lockdown, COVID-19 represents this really abrupt, disruptive change to daily life, and it's had enormous economic and social impacts. Now, if I were to stop and poll the group and just say, hey, why do you drink? The answers will be unique to each of you, right? They're different across the whole board. There's no single one reason why people drink or don't drink for that matter. That said, the general classifications of your reason, which we call drinking motives, those are super important. And in general, there's 4 major classifications of drinking motives. The first is social, and that's exactly what it sounds like. You drink to be social, you drink to celebrate, to make parties and social gatherings and Zoom meetings more fun. There's conformity motives. That's drinking to conform, drinking to fit in, drinking to not be left out of the social situation. Could be indirect or direct peer pressure. And then you have enhancement motives, and that's to enhance feelings, to feel the high or the sense that alcohol provides, that warmth, that intoxicating effect. And the last general classification is coping motives. And this is a bit of a sinister one. This is drinking to forget about your worries. This is drinking to control stress, to control moods, drinking to forget about problems. And in particular, coping motives are especially important and especially impactful. During the pandemic, drinking to cope has been linked to alcohol use. So compared to pre-emergency levels, persons drinking to cope during the pandemic increased their past month drinking and also experienced more alcohol-related problems. And this makes sense when you think about the pandemic and the stress that it's brought. Psychological distress is a well-recognized risk factor for relapse as well as increased drinking. So homework for you, because what type of professor would I be to not assign homework? I want you to engage in some self-assessment and some critical self-assessment. I want you to ask yourself, why am I drinking? Why have I been drinking? Has my drinking increased during the pandemic? You know, take a second, take a few weeks and just log your drinking. And you can do this with your eating. We talked about obesity earlier. Food logging is a super powerful way to really assess what's going into your body. The same's true with drinking. Log your drinking, track the amount you drink each day during each drinking event. Note how many drinks you have when you do drink. You know, and I think another important thing is to note the feelings or emotions you have when you begin your drinking event. So thanks for your time. Appreciate being here and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Berry. Jody, I'm going to turn it over to you. You had, I think we're collecting our questions. So if you want to take it from here. Thank you, all the speakers. Excellent job.
Absolutely. We had wonderful tips and tricks and information tonight that I hope that many of you had never heard of before. And I hope that everyone can hopefully walk away with some nuggets. You know, I pray that, that we're not, none of us are using alcohol to cope, but if we are, that we can seek the help. I hope that, we learn more about what our amazing telehealth students and faculty are doing, what our awesome athletic trainers are doing. I used to be one of those many years ago, but wasn't formally trained. And so I have the utmost of respect for those men and women that do that job day in and day out and see how much of an impact they have on the fields every day. So with that, if you still have some questions and want to pop up, feel free to put those in here. But one that has been going on in chat, is Darlene had asked a question. Darlene, if you wouldn't mind coming up and asking your question, and want to have, for the benefit of the audience and those who aren't following chat, to have Dr. Carpenter answer your questions live.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. Hello, my name is Darlene White, and I have the pleasure to work in the Human Clinical Research Facility with Dr. Deutsch, who's on this, and that's why I immediately wanted to watch the Zoom. I knew he'd have something really great for me to hear. And Dr. Carpenter actually came and visited our facility, and we're hoping to have some business with them in the future. But I have 4 parents, and they're all teetering 80 years old. And of course, my husband and I are in our 50s, and I have a child in college at A&M, and we're always buying different vitamins, and we really don't know if we're wasting our money and what we should be targeting, which vitamins. So Dr. Carpenter so graciously answered the chat, and he said vitamin D, vitamin B1, vitamin B12, and a daily multi with zinc, and to exercise safely outside with those vitamins. That would be key to increase our immune system and ability to respond to acute disease, which was really great advice, because my husband does the shopping and he's always buying all kinds of things that I don't even know if it's, a waste of money. So I am going to give him this list so that we can get these particular vitamins and hone into better health. And I think that's key to fighting off this disease or any other. So I'm very happy that I logged on and was part of this great Zoom meeting.
Thank you, Darlene. Dr. Carpenter, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that one of the really important principles behind Darlene's question is that, there are lots of supplements that people will try to sell you, miracle cures, snake oil, whatever you want to call it. The reality of it is that through a very balanced diet and through the education that you can get through, for instance, the Department of Nutrition here within the College of Education, you can get a huge amount of your necessary nutrients without having to pay a lot of money to buy extra supplements. Those three areas, though, vitamin D, vitamin B1 called thiamine, and B12, are very frequently deficient, especially in older Americans, especially if they have a history of chronic disease or prior abdominal surgeries. So it's very important to talk to your doctor about those things, especially if you have a history of anemia. But you don't necessarily need to go out and spend a huge amount of money at GNC.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter.
Something, Jody, to this.
Yes, please. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so there's a lot of recent research that show that people that got COVID actually have low plasma vitamin D levels. So whether taking vitamin D will protect us, I'm not sure, but there is apparently some relation between people with low vitamin Ds and getting the COVID infection. So it's always good to sit outside also in these times to get a lot of sunshine. That helps to make you endogenous vitamin D. And if there is a big problem, you can take some vitamin D pills. They are not very expensive, but that's the only thing that I really know in this field, that there is a significant relation between.
Dr. Deutsch, you actually answered a question that someone else had had sent me privately, and it was about sunshine, and someone had asked, how much sun should we be getting?
Yeah, the vitamin D production in your human body is very fast. So within 15 minutes, it's already enough. So there should not be a limit to that, but it's, of course, always a little bit more complicated because some people that are still outside have still low vitamin D. So there is another mechanism there that people not quite understand. But so I'm a little bit careful, because if you have a low concentration, it doesn't mean that when you take it, it will help. But this is the only observation that is clear, that low vitamin D is usually present when people get COVID, and that's the only point.
That's very interesting. I remember from my days in undergrad about, as Dr. Carpenter was talking about, the different vitamins, and I believe it's A, D, E, and K. Are those the ones that are water soluble or fat soluble?
Fat soluble, but that's actually.
So the others are the ones that you take and you just flush out in your body later. So very fascinating information. Next up, Steve Phillips, if you could come on screen. You had asked a question at the time of registration about being in the gym, and some questions about different information you're hearing from medical people and masks. So can you ask that question?
Okay. I think it was already answered, but I have another question, because I did ask that question, and that's what Joyce decided not to allow. But how is COVID affecting our football team right now? And is it a serious contagion right now across the board with the athletes? And what type of repercussions are we going to see if all of these athletes start getting sick?
Dr. Greenwood.
Yeah, I thought those could come my way. Certainly, I'm not able to discuss HIPAA medical conditions, so I'm not able to give you, rates or specifics regarding that. But I will tell you that Texas A&M was one of the first Division I Power 5 SEC school to come out with their infection control plan. And a lot of other institutions have mirrored their infection control plan off of Texas A&M. So it is a very tight plan, but obviously you're dealing with large numbers of individuals that, even though you're doing a lot of testing and you're doing a lot of screening, you're doing a lot of education, they are still going to be away from athletics and out in the community and in classes and et cetera. And so that is something that still is a concern. So do we have student athletes going in and out of quarantine and isolation? We do, but they're being very closely tracked. And then but prior to return, they are getting cardiac testing, respiratory testing, and they're going through a graded progression plan to make sure that they are safe and healthy to return.
Thank you, Dr. Greenwood. And Steve, I don't know, and someone can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I had heard that that our game, and I'm assuming it's from our side based on the recent tests, positive tests, that we postponed our game, our upcoming game against Tennessee. So yeah. It's been a sad week in the SEC across the board. We saw Arkansas's coach test positive. Various players. Undergraduate student worker with our team. So it's just hitting everybody. So, all right. Next question on the board is if Laura Rubush could come up. She had a couple of questions that I think was very beneficial.
Hi, yes, thank you for having us tonight. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I don't think I'm in the minority because sometimes I just don't like to exercise. So I was wondering if our panelists could give us some tips to get more active in our daily life without it necessarily feeling like we're exercising.
It's open for anybody.
I'll start and say, again, as someone who's treated individuals that have suffered from excessive weight over the last 25 years, the reality of it is that we try to exercise too much. And the idea that was brought forward of making this play, of making this fun, of setting attainable goals for yourself and being stepwise in that is so incredibly important. And bringing in the people that you do love with you. I will tell you that you, by going and getting a pedometer or just using your iPhone, can measure how many steps you've had in a day. Make it a game for yourself. Make it a set goal so that it's actually going to be there. And then be willing to reward yourself, maybe not with a pint of Bluebell ice cream, but perhaps with something else that you really, really, I love Bluebell, but something that you can perhaps be able to move forward with. Oftentimes with our patients that have had success with bariatric surgery, we encourage them to reward themselves with things like new clothes or a new item that they can actually utilize, like a better pair of shoes to go and exercise as they move forward. The other thing to look at is that this is really an important aspect of your health. We heard that at the very beginning from Dr. Deutsch. The reality of it is, if you're not in good cardiovascular shape beforehand, you put yourself at a greater degree of risk for COVID. So you're rewarding yourself by preloading to be able to withstand this condition if you were to undergo infection.
Anyone else care to respond to that question?
It just makes me think of the stages of change, and pre-contemplation and contemplation are all stages of the change process, and change, it can happen in quick bursts, but often happens kind of slowly over time. So even finding opportunities again to think about and contemplate what you want, because that's something we don't often do. in our lives is slow down and check in and dream and think about, what we want to be differently. So yeah, every little bit towards finding something that works for you is good stuff.
A question came up during registration, and I don't see this person on here, so I will ask it. And so they asked, how does chronic stress impact our mental health in these times?
Okay, I'll take that one. Chronic stress impacts your mental health in a lot of ways. Stress wears you out, and so it can make you feel really, really foggy. And like I talked about in my presentation, it also impacts your ability to think really clearly. And so, of course, that's going to translate to feeling differently mentally. I think a lot of times when we constantly feel a looming insecurity, which is partly why you have a stress response, it's hard to feel your best emotionally and mentally. So chronic stress can definitely play out in your mental health. It can impact your sleep. It can impact just feeling yourself. So both of which impact your mental health. I'll also defer to my favorite psychologist, Carley Mcchord, to answer that question.
I don't know what else I have to contribute. That was great.
So supportive.
Thanks for the vote of confidence. I don't know. I mean, it also makes me think of, when you're in a really trying time, and you talked a little bit about this, of like your prefrontal cortex and critical thinking skills going offline, that we kind of, in times of threat, stay in the downstairs part of our brain. And this fight or flight kind of response, and our mental health and our brains work best when they're integrated, kind of top to bottom and left to right. And stress can really throw off what your brain and your body are focused on in terms of survival and actual.
Carly, you just briefly mentioned, I think you used the term the downstairs portion of your brain or something like that. Can you elaborate on that in layman's terms? Because that's a very interesting concept.
I think about, so your brainstem is the most kind of reptilian, primitive part of your brain that's responsible for breathing and heart beating and things like that. And so again, when you're in survival mode, I think more of your primitive survival brain is in action, whereas I call your upstairs brain kind of that prefrontal cortex thinking part of your brain.
Great, thank you. I'm trying to type as quickly as I can, because that was a very, I couldn't ask to be more basic than what you'd said. So thank you very much. But for my primitive brain, that was a perfect answer.
I'm trying to think of a researcher who uses those terms. I'm blanking, but they wrote The Whole Brain Child, and so they do a good job of explaining that.
Well, thank you. So Alyssa Habenitcher asked a minute ago in the chat, any update on the A&M, the Fuji or federal government joint venture under Operation Warp Speed? Does anyone, I see Rob nodding. Rob, anything you can add to knowledge you can share that's publicly available?
Well, the specifics, I'm not going to speak directly out of what's happening with regards to Fuji, but there were some very important things that happened with regards to the FDA this week. Most particularly, we have made some advancement with regards to one of the vaccines, specifically that produced by Pfizer. Some very promising information that has come out about that. One of the things to realize, though, is that is not, as Dr. Deutsch said, is not going to just solve the problem. It's not going to magically go away. There are currently about 30 million doses of that particular vaccine that we know have been produced. Each of these vaccinations for the individuals are going to require 2 separate shots. So that means about 15 million doses that are currently prepped and going to be in the arms of individuals by the end of this year. It's going to be several more months before the rest of the vaccines come online and we have access to this. One of the things we're working very diligently within the Health Science Center and specifically within the College of Medicine is to set up the very complex logistics of getting the vaccine once it's proven to be safe to you as individuals in an appropriate fashion, because it's going to actually come out in a stepwise fashion based upon need. One of the things that's most important coming out of the federal government is that they're looking at this being equitable. So it's not just people with the best health insurance or that live in the right, quote, right type of area, end quote, but rather those people that need it and could benefit from it the most. Individuals with chronic diseases, those who suffer from problems like obesity that we were talking about, individuals over the age of 65. So there's a lot of work that's going to go into that. We just don't want people to think that magically this is all going to go away because a vaccine's approved.
Thank you, Dr. Carpenter. Someone else who I don't think that they're on the call had asked during the registration process, and I believe that they're on faculty here. They said, as faculty, how can we deal with both ourselves and doctoral students, and I would fill in undergraduate students as well, mental health issues during this pandemic?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
Sure, it says, as faculty, how can we deal with both ourselves and our students' mental health issues during this pandemic?
Do I get to go back on mute now?
No,
I'll jump in. I think there's a difference between a mental health issue and just a general mental state. And so if there is some symptomology going on or even some diagnoses, I'll defer that to Carley, but we have resources here at Texas A&M that we should lean on and utilize and refer them to tell somebody. They have helplines. But in terms of just helping people's general mental state, I think providing that social support, encouraging them, giving them a little grace, encouraging them to engage in healthy behaviors that are proactive and preventative would be good.
Anyone else want to ask that? I think we got time for one more question. Trying to make sure I've captured them all. I think for the first time, we've actually asked and answered all the questions that have been received in chat, both privately and publicly. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dean Alexander for any closing comments.
Jody, I'm really digging this idea of the walking Zoom meeting. I think I'm going to try to do this way more often now because, by the eighth Zoom meeting a day, I'm done mentally and emotionally. And they talk about Zoom fatigue. I totally understand what's going on. So I always walk at lunch, but now that gives me another excuse. I'll find at least one more meeting to walk in. Hopefully no one will think it's rude. All right, wonderful. Well, I want to say thank you to the presenters and to all of you for coming this evening. We are open to continuing to provide answers to questions as you think about them later and you want to send them to us. We're happy to ask the experts here on the call to share what else they can think about. I love the ideas of making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And Meg, your explanation of dealing with stress in the way your body expects you to deal with stress, and that is go out and exercise, was an excellent example of ways that we can be good to our bodies, prepare them for this should anything happen. Should we catch the coronavirus, the best we can ask is that we're well prepared. And in the meantime, we're all, even if we don't catch it, we're all dealing with this pandemic, the shutdowns. Well, we've got family members who are without jobs or ourselves are without jobs, and we're trying to support. And I know each of us are reaching out and trying to be a nexus for our little network of social folks. So, wow, thank you so much. We look forward to continuing to provide the service that we love to do as a land-grant institution, that is bring the message to you guys, to the folks that we work with. So feel free to email. We'll get as many answers as we can, and do take care of yourselves. Particularly important this evening as we think about health and wellness in a COVID world. If you want to get involved in any of the initiatives that you've heard today, you can always make a small gift, or you can talk to Jody. How can we connect you to the folks you want to volunteer? We'll find a way for you to get involved. So let us know how you'd like to stay engaged. And everyone, do take care. Bye-bye.